In this episode, we look at a new way to set goals. Get excited because this is Tiny Leaps, Big Changes. Welcome to another episode of Tiny Leaps, Big Changes, where I share simple strategies you can use to get more out of your life. My name is Greg Clunas, and in this episode, so I wanted to tackle something that I haven't seen too many innovations done in. So goal setting obviously is a major part of the personal development space. Any of us who are trying to improve our lives, who are trying to accomplish something, who are trying to move forward in some way, needs to be setting goals. And there are a few approaches to goal setting, some that I've discussed in the past. For example, the SMART framework, SMART. The problem that I've found with many of the frameworks that are out there is that, it's twofold. And we're going to be discussing that in today's episode, as well as introducing you to something I've been developing here over at Tiny Leaps called the LEAP framework, which hopefully will be a new tool in your toolbox when you are trying to set goals to help you create something that has a better chance of actually getting done. So this should be a super fun episode. As I mentioned in the intro, the purpose of this episode is to sort of share something I've been working on here at Tiny Leaps. It is a new approach to goal setting, one that may be more useful to certain situations. I've certainly found it useful in my own life. It's based on my personal process of setting goals, goals that many of them I have been able to accomplish. So it should hopefully be helpful depending on the kind of goal you're creating. And we're going to go through all of that. Now, the big reason I wanted to do that is because I found that for certain situations, many of the frameworks that already exist just aren't as valuable. So for example, I've talked about SMART goals in the past, which for those of you who aren't familiar, a SMART goal stands for specific, measurable, actionable, results driven, and timed, I believe. In some of those letters, you can switch around with other words. But the whole idea is making a specific goal that you set a deadline on and that you're actually able to do something to help you accomplish it. Now, while that is valuable, there are some major drawbacks to it. First of all, we have to remember that the SMART framework was created as a management tool. It's really built for corporations, not necessarily individuals. Now, is it still applicable to individual goals? Sure. For certain goals, it can still be helpful, and people have been using it for decades to improve the quality of their lives. But it's not a tool made for individuals. It was made by a management consultant who, I can't remember which company he was doing work with at the time, but he noticed that employee productivity was low and that people were sort of losing motivation towards the things that were corporate goals. And so he created a new way to set those corporate goals. Again, it was not made as something for individuals necessarily. Now, since then, it's been adapted and people have used it over and over again, and it's become probably the most widely known and widely talked about goal setting framework. But it does have its limitations when you are looking at an individual's life, and many of the goals that we're trying to set that actually require long-term lifestyle changes rather than specific actions for a short window of time. Now, here's what I mean by that. If you are a corporation and you have a goal to increase sales by the end of the year by 20%, you can map specific actions that your salespeople and your organization can take every single day. You can map specific changes that your team can take every single day to accomplish that goal by the end of the year. Now, you don't necessarily have to worry about changing your day-to-day for the long term. You just need to change it for this short window of time to accomplish the end goal. It's similar to when you were in school and you had tests, right? So you would study, and read, and then take the test, and then eventually you forget all of it because you just learned it for the test. That's how a SMART goal ends up working in a lot of situations. It's not necessarily conducive for creating lifestyle changes, which the majority of personal development goals as it relates to our fitness, nutrition, finances, career, relationships, and mental health, as it relates to those areas, many of it comes down to lifestyle changes, which again, SMART goals are not specifically designed for. So I wanted to create something that worked better for me. And for the last few years, I've been using a process that up until recently, I didn't really have a name for, right? It's only been recently that I've sat down and tried to organize it in a way that I could communicate it to you. But it is something I've been using for a little while, and it has helped with goals like losing weight. It has helped with goals like getting back into writing. It has helped with goals like this podcast, getting episodes out. It's helped with goals like getting into running, like having a better relationship with Rachel, like having a better relationship with my family. And so I want to share that with you now. And the system that I have developed is called LEAP goals, LEAP goals. And with the LEAP framework, it is designed for process-driven, lifestyle change-based goals. So whenever you're trying to create a new version of yourself, something that is going to stick around past the actual accomplishment stage, right? So you set a goal and you have this thing you want to accomplish. But if you want that version of yourself to still be there after you accomplish it, if it's a process-driven, lifestyle-based change goal, then you need to focus on a framework that is all about designing a lifestyle that is sustainable. We want long-term change in our approach to goal setting. So that is what the LEAP framework is designed for. Again, it's not perfect for every single goal. If you have a goal to write a book in a specific window of time, maybe you've got a deadline from your publisher, maybe you need it to publish on a certain date. If you have a specific outcome that you're trying to achieve that doesn't need lifestyle change afterwards, then go ahead and use the SMART goal framework or the FAST goal framework or any of the number of other frameworks that exist out there. But if you have a goal that you want the version of yourself that comes from it to exist after you have accomplished that goal, then try out the LEAP framework. Now, let's get into what the letters actually mean. So the L in LEAP stands for long term. We want our goals to be thinking past the actual accomplishment, right? So we might hit a milestone, we might do something major over this period of time, but that's not the thing that we're looking for. We're looking for something that allows us to think about the long-term benefits. And that means maybe we can only do a very small amount of activity today, but that doesn't matter in the long term. Over the course of the next 3, 5, 10 years, that tiny activity you did today is still moving you forward in the grand scheme of things. So it takes a little bit less pressure off of having to accomplish large amounts each individual day, because we don't care about a specific date where things need to be done by. We're focused on the rest of our lives. We're focused on the future. We're focused on the next 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So thinking long-term in our goal setting is going to allow us to build goals that over time become more achievable because we've been able to put in the time towards it. Now, the E in LEAP goals stands for empathetic. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen in goal setting is that people get excited. They get overly just motivated and pumped up and ready to go. And while that energy is good, it also leads to us making goals that just purely are not achievable. They're things that we could never possibly do. It's not within the realm of possibilities for us. And that's a topic I'm going to be covering in a future episode very soon. So make sure you check out that future episode. But it's not within the realm of possibilities for us. However, we're excited and we've read all these books saying, oh, shoot for the stars because then you'll land on the moon or on the barn house or whatever the quote is. We get excited and we set these major goals and never really take into consideration what our life looks like. Because the truth is, the person who accomplishes the goal is not the same person who sets the goal. There needs to be a journey there. There needs to be change there. But the person who sets the goal is still starting from somewhere. They're starting with a handicap. They have a family they need to raise. They have loved ones that they want to stay in touch with. They have all of these things that, while are ultimately positive, do have to take time away from doing the activities that would help them accomplish the goal. And so it doesn't really matter where you're starting from. It's more about being empathetic to your situation and realizing that I am starting from this place, and that means that I may not be able to show up every single day. That means I may not be able to put in as much work as this other person. That means that I might feel like the tasks I'm doing don't truly matter because they're so tiny, right? But we have to be empathetic to where we are. It might take us a little bit longer, but as long as we show up and make progress, we're able to move forward. We're able to keep things going. And so many people that I've spoken with get frustrated with their goals, and they maybe stop even setting goals simply because it feels like what they are able to do based on their current life is too small. It doesn't matter. So why would they even bother? And if only they could change this, and this, or if only they could get out of this job, or if only they could buy more time to go to the gym, and if only, and if only, and if only. And we get into this place where instead of looking at where we are, being empathetic to that, and actually taking action based on our situation, we start just wishing that our situation was different. Well, that's the whole point of this, right? The whole point of engaging in these activities every day is to make our situation different. But we have to go on that journey. That means starting from where we're at, being empathetic to that, and doing what needs to be done to take one step forward, no matter how small that step actually is. Now, the A in the LEAP framework stands for actionable. Now, this one is something that I originally picked up from the SMART goal framework, and I think it is perfect. I think it is something that every single goal needs to have. Now, I do have one slight caveat to that, one change that I've made that maybe was intended in the original SMART framework, but I have not seen it in any of my reading on the subject. One big thing that I added to this definition of actionable is that it needs to be something that you can do, that you have control over. For example, many people around the new year may set a goal like, I want to get a promotion this year, or I want to get a raise. Now, here's the truth. You do not control that. If you are looking for a promotion, that by definition means that somebody else has to make that decision. Somebody else has to sign that paperwork. Now, you can do everything right, and for factors outside of your control, still not get a promotion. You can do everything right, and for things that you just truly have no control over whatsoever, still not get that raise. In fact, you can do everything right and still get fired because the economy crashes or because of any number of reasons. So setting a goal around something that you are not ultimately in charge of, something that you can't actually take action on in order to accomplish it, that just makes no sense to me. And this is a lesson I learned after one of the things that I always wanted as I was growing up. I had this major goal of retiring my parents, of striking it rich somehow, and I had no idea how, but just doing something, accomplishing something big, bringing value to the world, making a lot of money, and being able to pay for my parents' retirement. And in the back of my mind, growing up, I always knew that it was not something that they were necessarily going to be able to do on their own. So I took it upon myself. They didn't ask me to, but I took it on my own shoulders to find a way to do it, right? So I had this goal, and for 10 years, maybe even longer, this was the driving factor behind working hard, behind gaining skills, behind looking for opportunities, behind trying and failing and trying and failing at business after business after business after business. This was the driving motivator. And then guess what happened? My dad died. Now, after the initial shock and the initial just losing my mind around this, it hit me that, it didn't matter how hard I worked. It didn't matter how rich I was. It didn't matter where I was in my life or how close to that goal I was. This was something outside of my control that stopped this goal from being possible. So that wasn't a good goal. Like setting a goal that I ultimately don't control the choice as to whether or not that goal happens is just going to be a recipe for failure. Now, we can set that as a target. We can set that as something that we're aspiring to. We can set that as any number of other words, but it is not a goal. That is a dream. That is something we want to happen and are going to work hard towards, but ultimately can never really control if we accomplish. So your goals do need to be actionable in the sense that there's something you can act on. There's a specific task that you can be doing, but it also needs to be actionable in the sense that you ultimately make the decision as to whether or not it can be accomplished. And then the last part of the LEAP framework, the P in the LEAP framework, is about being process focused. Now, I've found that setting goals around the process rather than setting goals around the outcome help keep your motivation high. Why? Because accomplishing the goal for that day is fully within your control. You just need to show up. Showing up means you win that day. And that motivation, that psychology, that mentality of knowing all you have to do is show up and you win that day, that keeps you going. That is the mindset that allowed me to host a daily show for as long as I have. That is the mindset that's allowed me to put out 500 plus episodes of this podcast, because it doesn't matter if this episode does well and this episode does, it doesn't matter. None of those things matter. Those are not things that I am in full control over. You guys decide if an episode is good. You guys decide if it's something you want to share or not. What I control is whether or not an episode goes out. That's what I control. So if my goal is, I need to release an episode that gets 20,000 downloads, I'm setting myself up for failure because I do not control that. If my goal is I need to show up at whatever schedule and record episodes that ultimately get released, I win just by showing up. I win just by committing to the process of being here. Doesn't matter how many downloads it got. It doesn't matter how many views it gets on YouTube. It matters whether or not I got it out. And that keeps you in a great place when the negative comments eventually come in, because guess what? It's probably not under your control. So setting a process-focused goal rather than a results or outcome-focused goal is one of the keys to staying motivated. And that's why I made it a central part of the LEAP framework. So one of the examples that I use to explain a process-focused goal even more, back when I was doing sales more often to bring on brands for the show and my previous sales jobs, rather than setting goals around, let's say, I need to do 50 cold emails a week, right? Instead of making that which would be an outcome. Instead, I decide, you know what? I need to send emails for an hour a day. Now, what is the difference here? Well, by having that big looming number, 50 emails a week, which, might even be more. By having that big looming number just sitting there, I start getting crushed by it. I start getting overwhelmed. I start feeling like, you know what, I'll just start tomorrow. I'll just, I don't need to do it today. Like I've got time. I can make it work. I'll just binge it at the end. By having the goal be, instead, I'm going to show up for an hour a day. It doesn't matter how many emails I send in that hour. I'm just going to be there for an hour. I end up actually sending more than 50, because now each individual day is just focused on, I just need to be there for an hour. If I have a bad day and I only send out 5, okay. If I have a great day and I send out 15, awesome. But I just need to show up for an hour a day. And it doesn't matter what each individual day looks like. It doesn't matter what the end of the week looks like. As long as I can do that every day, things will keep moving forward and progress will be made. So that is the LEAP framework. And I truly believe that for certain goals, the types of goals that rely on lifestyle change, that rely on a long-term view, that rely on starting where you're at, the LEAP framework will help. So just to recap, the L is for long-term, the E is for empathetic, the A is for actionable, and the P is for process-focused. If you can build these 4 things into your goal-setting process, you will be setting yourself up for success. So I hope this was valuable to some of you out there. I'd love to get your feedback. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment down below. And while you're here, be sure to click subscribe, click the thumb, and click the little bell so that you never miss an episode. If you're listening to the audio, head over to youtube.com/Greg Clunis and join us there so that I can hear your opinion, your thoughts on this episode. I'd love to connect with you. And as always, remember that all big changes come from the tiny leaps you take every day.